Okay, 5G. It's the number one trending topic at the moment. Yeah, everyone's talking about it now more than, say, 6 months ago, and there's a lot of people talking about it 6 months ago. Um, 12 months ago, we went to Canberra to do our 5G testing on our products. And the reason we did that was we had no knowledge of actually how 5G worked. We had read things on the internet. We've seen a lot of fear mongering and scaring of people from people with YouTube videos on the internet, which to me really weren't qualified to give an opinion because they didn't work in the industry. I've got 20 years as an intuitive building biologist. So what we did was we went to Canberra to actually go to where 5G was operating. And where we went to was Dickson in the ACT. And those of you who've read our two blogs on 5G would be a little bit aware of this. Okay, so what we did when we got there into the actual 5G zone, and some little facts about 5G is that if you're aware or not aware, 5G isn't being broadcast by large 4G mobile phone towers. And it's amazing the amount of people who contact us and say, oh, there's a tower going up down the road, or there's a tower down the road, it's a 5G tower, and they're 4G. And there's even a website out there that says that you can go online and see where your nearest 5G tower is. No, it's not, it's 4G. 5G is being broadcast through LED streetlights, which have a microcell antenna on them. I've got a photo here of one. I just hope it comes through clearly enough. This is a photo of an LED streetlight in Tyabb, which is a suburb on the Mornington Peninsula. Now, these streetlights were put up by the Mornington Peninsula Shire, I think about 18 months ago. And I know it's a very blurry photo, but if you look very closely here, you'll see what looks like a little round antenna. That's the microcell antenna. So what they do with 5G is they go into a suburb, and suburbs are delineated by major roads. So, like if you use Google Earth, like I use Google Earth all the time to read different people's properties for radiation issues, like Earth radiation lines and bioplasmic radiation, all sorts of things like that. Okay, so the Tyabb Council installed these about 18 months ago. That doesn't mean that 5G is up and running. What we require for 5G, as far as the final piece of equipment, is, and I don't know whether this is going to show through, is this photo here, which is, I think, is a repeater. Like the telcos don't give me any information when I talk to them about what is what of what we're seeing. So if you see the streetlights, and then if you see this equipment going up in your area, you know that 5G is either turned on or about to be turned on. Getting back to Canberra, we flew to Canberra, took all of our products to do the testing in a 5G zone. Took my fiance at the time, well, not even a fiance, my partner at the time, Leanne, who's now my wife, and an independent kinesiologist to do kinesiology testing with and without the products, and I did biotensor testing with and without the products. These are intuitive methods of reading energy, and they are far better than using EMF meters. EMF meters can be very misleading, and I was watching a YouTube video yesterday of an English couple in George Street in Sydney using a radio frequency meter to measure what they thought was 5G in Sydney. And I can tell you in that video, even though his radio frequency readings were quite high and they were saying that 5G was turned on, it wasn't turned on. Because through Google Earth, I can read the images, I can read what's going on. So when we got to Canberra, the first thing we found, and as I said, suburbs are delineated by main roads, and so the whole suburb of Dickson, up to its boundaries, had the 5G streetlights installed with the repeaters, and the 5G was operating. So what we found, first of all, was there's a radiation charge with 5G that comes up vertically out of the ground. It comes up to roughly about 5 feet. When you get that occurring, what happens is that when you have a building in that zone, the radiation charge fully engulfs that building. And I know for a fact from my work that buildings that are full of charge are not healthy buildings. When you have a building that's full of charge, they are buildings where people don't recover from illnesses or certain things happen, unhealthy cell growth. You know what I'm talking about. That's where the link between radiation and cancer comes in. There are other instances which do cause exactly the same radiation charge outside and inside as what 5G does, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So, the streetlights themselves don't broadcast a radiation charge horizontally through the air throughout the whole area. It's only coming up out of the ground. That charge causes a huge amount of electromagnetic stress in the body. And if you've seen our blog where we've got the video of the kinesiology and the biotensor testing of Leanne without the geoclings or the stellar dome harmonizers in place, a lot of her meridians and organs were under quite a lot of electromagnetic stress. Another thing that 5G does is that it activates a set of quite dangerous Earth magnetic grid lines. And Earth radiation is something that, as a building biologist, I know to be a big problem if you have some of these wider Earth magnetic grid lines running through your house. They can be big health issues. And there are different types of Earth magnetic grid lines, and I won't go into them, but we'll save that for another blog where we've got our act together with our Zoom, maybe on another Friday afternoon. Anyway, what we did find is that a particular type of Earth magnetic grid line is activated with 5G. We're aware of those Earth magnetic grid lines because they're activated by other energetic situations, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. These grid lines are roughly 2 meters wide, and they go vertically up into the air. And as they get higher, they actually get wider, which is quite an interesting phenomenon. The electromagnetic stress that you experience over the top of the grid line is far worse than the electromagnetic stress you'll experience either side of the grid line, although either side, no matter where, you're going to be under a lot of radiation stress. That grid runs north, south, east, west, and it's roughly 70 meters apart, roughly. That's what I've measured with Google Earth, and we've double-checked and triple-checked that over time. Another thing we found with 5G is that any natural healthy Earth energy line, which are commonly called ley lines, that's spelled L-E-Y. And if you search the internet, you'll find different people talking about different ley lines, and for example, how in Europe a lot of the cathedrals used to be put over these energetic ley lines to bring the energy within the cathedral or church or whatever up. And by doing that, you increase what I call the resonance or the negative charge, which is a very healthy energy in the churches. These ley lines, some of them are quite wide, for example, around 70 meters wide. That particular ley line grid runs north-south and is 25 kilometers apart. Then there are smaller ley lines which are roughly around 160 meters apart, and they might be 10 to 15 meters wide. If you have a house that is over one of these very healthy ley lines, what will happen is that you will have a radiance which has a very healthy negative charge. There will be very little electromagnetic stress on the occupants within the house, which would also mean that they would be happier, healthier houses, because electromagnetic stress on our endocrine organs causes hormone imbalances and neurotransmitter imbalances, and does have a big effect on our emotional stability or instability. So houses that have ley lines are really good, healthy houses. Our stellar dome radiation harmonizer, which we developed last year, it actually creates or recreates that radiation resonance of a ley line. However, when you introduce 5G into an area where these ley lines are, that healthy radiance, that negative charge from the ley line is totally wiped out. It disappears. And that's going to be a real problem for people who are quite sensitive to energy, who may be living over these ley lines, because 1 minute before 5G is turned on, everything's fine, although there are some instances which can interfere with the ley line energy, which I'll talk about again later. They come and turn 5G on, and that ley line healthy radiance is gone, it's disappeared, it's been replaced with a strong radiation charge from the 5G. The same also applies to water bodies. When we were in Canberra doing our testing, after our testing, we decided to head down the road to Belconnen to get some lunch. And we were only told, or Optus, nothing against the telcos, like they've been really good with giving us information, told us, or on their website, had advertised that certain suburbs in Canberra had 5G and some didn't. Oh, sorry, but there were certain that did, and didn't mention any other suburbs. When we got down to Belconnen for lunch after our testing, we saw that the 5G streetlights were everywhere, and they all had repeaters on them, and that the 5G was actually turned on in Belconnen too. Where we had lunch was right next to a little lake. I can't remember the name of the lake. It was quite pretty. And we noticed that the resonance, or the healthy negative charge that water bodies, which generally give off, was gone. It was actually, the water was actually giving off a positive charge, which is not healthy water. So any rivers, streams, lakes, any of those nice ponds, water bodies in parklands or whatever, which a lot of people who are sensitive to energy will be able to tune into their energy. With the 5G, it just totally wiped it out. Another thing we observed with 5G is the planetary energy. Now let me explain this. The planetary energy is an energy that flows from north to south and east to west during the day, and at night time it reverses. And that's a very healthy energy when it's flowing correctly, when it's not being interfered with other circumstances such as solar winds that are very high, which I'll talk about later on. So what had happened with the 5G, in the 5G areas, is that instead of the planetary flow of energy running from north to south and east to west, it had reversed. And from what I know and what I've experienced over the many years, is when you see a reversal of the planetary energy, people are emotionally affected, and that's where I start to get all the phone calls. Like people ringing me saying, "Gerard, what the hell's going on here? I woke up this morning feeling like a bus has hit me, or I didn't sleep very well at all. I had some horrific nightmares," and all sorts of different instances that generally sensitive people feel, but you don't have to be on the sensitive side to be affected or feel it anyway. And that was quite disturbing to see that the planetary flows reverse, but it was only happening in the 5G zone. Outside of that, everything was fine. Okay, I have been talking about other circumstances that recreate that same situation of what 5G does, which is causing the radiation charge to come out of the ground and cause the activation of the Earth magnetic grid lines, which are normally dormant, which I call the activated grid, and the reversal of the planetary flow. And this is important information for a lot of people, because a lot of the YouTube videos I've seen on the internet talk about why 5G as being a military weapon. I don't think it's a military weapon. Our digital TV is a military weapon. 5G is just, in a sense, what the telcos believe what we need, because as we know, like take today, for example, everyone's in lockdown, everyone's at home, everyone's using their Wi-Fi, everyone's using the bandwidth, and your 4G slows down. So the whole idea of 5G was to make it nice and fast. That's a nice thing to have, to keep the information flowing, except for what it does energetically. But anyway, getting back to what I was talking about, a lot of what I see on the internet is fear-mongering. They say that 5G is the worst thing we've ever had. We've never had anything like that before. When it comes along, everyone's going to be dropping like flies. The birds are going to be falling out of the air. The bees will be dying everywhere. And I can tell you, when we went to Canberra and did our testing, it was March, there was flowers out, and we observed these things, and there were bees. It wasn't a problem. There were birds flying everywhere. In fact, in the shopping centre area where we were doing the testing, there was a Woolworths, there was a couple of cafes, a three-storey office building, there was a library, there was lots of people walking around as if nothing was happening. Mind you, those people by the end of the day would be feeling a little bit wiped out and worn down because of being within the 5G field for a prolonged period of time will cause a great deal of electromagnetic stress, which will really, really, really wear you down. So those people at the end of the day would have been getting home going, boy, I had a big day, I'm really locked out, and, time to relax, and, I'm still feeling wiped out if you're living in that 5G area. So the 5G, what you've spoken about on the internet by a lot of people, which does create a lot of fear, and that's a big problem too, because fear does cause what they call anxiety cancer. We deal with a lot of practitioners around Australia and overseas who deal with mental health, and a lot of them talk to me about anxiety cancer, and we all often discuss about, for example, different patients of theirs, not talking about their patients, but in general, of how they're in fear of this and fear of that, and how they're big time in fear of 5G. And they're in so much fear that are anxious all the time, and that's slowly, really, really wearing the body down. So what I want to talk about now is those other energies that do exactly what 5G does, has been around forever and a day, as long as a man has been walking this earth, from the days of Adam and Eve, so to speak. And they are, first of all, and the number one is when we have a death on a property. And it sounds very macabre, but this is something that is a big reality. In my building biology work as a consultant in Melbourne, where I go to people's houses, you would think that I'm going to look at Wi-Fi issues or electrical radiation issues, or issues with transformers on power poles next to houses and mobile phone towers and things like that. It's never that. It's always when there's been a death in a property, and from a death on your land, or before the house was built, or death on the land after the house was built, or in the house, depending on the suburb or how old the suburb or city is. A death creates a very heavy energy, which is an emotional pain body energy of what we call bioplasmic radiation. And the bioplasmic radiation does exactly the same as 5G. It creates a charge, it comes out of the ground about 5 feet above the ground. It activates the activated grid as I talk about it. It reverses the planetary flow through to the boundaries of your property. You go into some of the older cities or around the world, like for example, in Australia, we've got Launceston, which is the oldest city in Australia. As you walk through the centre of Launceston, through amongst all these really, really old buildings, which have had a long history, there's been a lot of deaths. And so in Launceston, for example, and I'm not picking on it, because of the amount of people and the age of the city and the amount of deaths, it's a virtual 5G environment and always has been. I can fix that radiation charge with the bioplasmic radiation of the geoclines and the stellar dome. It's something that became a very big, obvious problem to us many, many years ago, and we worked very hard to find what is called the correct counter frequency to the energy of the bioplasmic radiation. Another example of another type of energy that is similar to, if not worse than 5G, is when we have very high solar winds. And there is a website that I go to every day, every morning. The first thing I look at when I get out of bed, and I start work at 7 in the morning, or 7:30, is spaceweather.com, and it shows the solar wind speed and it updates it every hour. Excuse me. And if the solar wind speeds happen to be around the 500 to 600 kilometres per second, that is But when a sunspot from the sun is directly facing us, the Earth, there is solar radiation, which is beta gamma, which has an effect on the Earth, which also causes a radiation charge to come out of the ground, just like 5G. However, the higher the wind speed, the further out of the ground that charge can come. And over the last 3 to 4 weeks, which is interesting timing with what's going on around the world with the virus and lockdowns and whatever, we've had some quite high solar winds where I've measured the charge out of the ground to twice as high as what 5G will be creating. That means that when we have these high solar winds, the entire planet is in a 5G environment. And some people are really shocked when I tell them that. They think, oh, no, that can't be right. But that is true. That's what's going on. The sensitive ones, again, when that's going on, they're on the phone to me. What's going on? I had a bad night, having a bad day. I feel completely wiped out. That is because when we have the high solar winds, with that charge coming out of the ground, again, it reverses the planetary flow, activates that dangerous grid, and when you go into a building, the whole building is full of charge. Another type of energy, which is also coming from outside you in, is when we have retrogrades. And everyone knows about Mercury retrograde. Everyone talks about Mercury retrograde. A lot of people I know have calendars with all the Mercury retrograde dates marked in it. And it's a case of taking every day as it comes with Mercury retrograde, because some days you can have a very high charge coming out of the ground, twice as bad as 5G. And on other days, you may not have anything. What can work against and be a benefit, in a sense, is if there is other astrological events going on at the time when there's high solar winds or retrogrades, which can and may have a balancing effect, and we do see that. I've had some people say to me, oh, okay, when Mercury goes into retrograde from beginning to end, we're going to have a greater charge in the air because of it. But no, that can fluctuate from time to time. Okay, so they're examples of other natural phenomena which occur and have been occurring year in, year out for a long, long period of time that is as bad or as, if not worse than 5G. So what I'm getting to is, with all this fear around 5G, a lot of it is unfounded. Yes, it is a radiation danger. However, we can fix it with harmonizers. We've done the testing. But it's not the worst thing that's ever happened. There are other things that come and go, as I've just mentioned then, that do create the same effect. Another thing to add to that too is that lately I've been doing a lot of research into what energies are like in commercial buildings and industrial buildings. I've been doing a lot of visiting commercial sites, just doing my own little private surveys, and not involving anyone, doing a lot of work using Google Earth to look at industrial and commercial buildings. And what I've found in the end, there, in an industrial or a commercial building, there's a radiation charge very, very similar to what you get from bioplasmic radiation from a death. However, it's throughout all industrial commercial buildings, and it's not to say that someone's died in every building, what things happen here and there. However, both commercial and industrial buildings have the same energetics, which is the whole entire building is engulfed with radiation charge. And if you have any outside spaces within the boundaries of the buildings, the radiation charge comes to that high above the ground. Another one, again, another good example of that is schools. People are always asking about schools. You know, do we have something to help the school children to protect them from? First of all, they say Wi-Fi, thinking that Wi-Fi is the biggest radiation danger in schools, but it's not. Schools basically are commercial sites. And so what happens with the schools have a radiation charge that comes to that high out of the ground outside, and within every classroom there's a radiation charge that fills every classroom, which might explain why, you know, in some schools, some kids have problems with a bit of bullying here and there, and the bullies could be reacting to the energies, which is having an effect on their endocrine organs, which is having an effect on their hormones, their neurotransmitters, and it's making them upset, angry, aggressive, you name it. It goes on like that. So there's another really good example of schools being the same energetic environment of 5G. Just going to go to chat here because I've got a few questions coming in from people. Just be patient for a sec. Not all the questions are coming up. Here's an interesting one from Susan. Do you think that the powers that be have deliberately hyped it up to create fear? Absolutely. They're the greatest fearmongers around. Look what's going on now. You know, we're going to be in lockdown. They're saying now till for 6 months. Like, does he have a crystal ball? Does he know what's going to happen in 6 months' time? Very good question. But you don't need powers that be to create fear-mongering. There are a lot of people who just love doing it I call it just sick people, that they're not being very grounded. I've got another question here from Clara in the UK. And she wanted me to talk about hospitals. Well, hospitals, there's another really, really good example of radiation charge throughout the whole hospital, which is exactly the same as what 5G does. We know what happens in hospitals. It's pretty self-explanatory. You know, people die. Lots and lots of people die. And that's the bioplasmic charge, which comes from the emotional pain body at the time of death. If we were all meditating Indian yogis and understood how to die in what they call Maha Samadhi, that radiation charge from someone dying wouldn't occur. You get the opposite. You get a radiance from that. But we're just not all there with any of that anyway. Okay, I'll just go on to some more questions which have come in over the last few days. And the top one is a really interesting one I've got on my list here from quite a few people, is 5G in relation to COVID-19. That's a really interesting one. Like, we're not allowed to make any medical claims. We're not really allowed to comment on things like that. We're not doctors per se. But when the first YouTube videos started to come out connecting 5G to COVID-19 in Wuhan, I just didn't buy it at first because of a couple of things. The bioplasmic charge in there in Wuhan, from what the city and China in general has experienced over a millennium, is so strong that when they turned 5G on in Wuhan, it wouldn't have been a case of, oh, I can feel the 5G. It would have been a case of, oh, I've got 5G on my phone. It would have been no difference. But what has come from it is, and there are a few doctors on the internet with I think some really good YouTube videos where they talk about the connection between 5G, which is radiation, and viruses and what goes on with the bronchioles and the lungs and the heart and everything, and the immune system. What they're saying that 5G does, I'll agree, but also what I will say is for 20 years I've been saying that all forms of radiation do the same thing. Different radiation fields which have charge, which cause electromagnetic stress in the body, will all operate at different frequencies. And as a medical intuitive, and when I read someone's organs intuitively as to which radiation fields are causing which organs to go into electromagnetic stress. Let's say, for example, bioplasmic radiation may be 3 or 4 organs, and 5G might be 4 or 5 organs, and digital TV might be 2 or 3 or 5 or 6, because if we knew what comes out of digital TV, which is a radiation charge in front of the screen, it's probably the most harmful appliance in the house, and we're totally unaware of that. If you want to talk a little bit about 5G, digital TV, back in 2008, I contacted the Digital Relight Corporation in Canberra and told them what I found, and they didn't like me talking about that and threatened to sue me for slander if I talked about it in public, which I talk about all the time, because people need to know that what they're sitting in front of, directly in front of every day or every night, is putting them under. Okay, better. We did our testing in Canberra, and the reason we did our testing in Canberra is, one, Canberra, some of the suburbs in Canberra were the first suburbs in Australia to actually have 5G set up. I don't know why it was there first, maybe to impress the politicians, I don't know. Before we said anything on our website about our products in 5G, we wanted to make damn sure that we'd done our testing and documented it so that no one could turn around and say, you're only saying this, you don't know what you're talking about, you haven't experienced it. Which is actually something that a lot of people on the internet who do talk about 5G, like you see a lot of very aggressive 5G YouTube videos out there, which are scaring the hell out of people. I know a lot of those people who've made those videos wouldn't know 5G if it hit them in the head, and I have questioned some of them, have they been to a 5G area, and they haven't, and they're claiming to be experts. So anyway, we went to Canberra, like Leanne and I, and we took a independent kinesiologist, Reese Posingis, and we did testing in the 5G zone in a suburb called Dickson. And we had done our research beforehand because Optus were advertising that Dickson had 5G and they were trying to sell 5G broadband in that suburb. And I'd assessed whether they had 5G operating by reading Google Earth, which is a skill I have and I've been doing for 20 years, reading different people's properties for different energy lines and different things, different types of radiation intuitively with Google Earth. So I had determined that yes, Dickson had 5G, that's where we're going to go. So we jumped on the plane, went to Dickson, got to Dickson to a small shopping centre area, and the first thing we noticed was, yes, the LED streetlights everywhere and these white repeaters on every fourth or fifth streetlight. I say that the 5G had not long been turned on because there were technicians working on some of those repeaters, which was really quite interesting. So when we're in Dickson, we were looking for different things. Well, we wanted to know the dynamics behind 5G, like if it's radiation, and I can feel radiation fields, and I teach people how to do that. How is it operating? Is it going through the sky? Is it coming out of the ground? What's it doing? So the first thing we found in 5G, Dickson, in the 5G area, is, just pointing to notepad on me, is that there was a radiation charge coming out of the ground. It came out of the ground about 5 feet above the ground. And for radiation charge to come out of the ground like that is not something that's abnormal. There are other types of energies that do actually create the same effect. It's actually a magnetoterelik energy that I've been doing some research from a website called spaceweather.com recently, which was explaining how when there are high solar winds, you get this magnetoterelik effect. So we had that magnetoterelik effect, which was the radiation charge coming out of the ground in the 5G zone. That was outside. What we then did was we went inside one of the commercial buildings there to do our testing inside in an office area, because it's more pertinent inside than outside. And what we found is when you, and I know this for a fact anyway, when you have a radiation charge coming out of the ground, that's a positive charge, which causes electromagnetic stress in the body. When you get to a building, that charge fully engulfs the building. Well, buildings that are fully engulfed with radiation charge, and as I said, it's not an unusual thing. I see it all the time with other things going on in people's houses. When you have that going on, then you have a very, very, very high risk of mitochondrial damage or cell damage, meridian energy interference, people not being able to recover from illnesses when they should have been recovering quite quickly, and cancer. You get unhealthy cell growth because of the charge in the air. That's another subject you could go on and on and on about, but in a nutshell, yes. The other thing I found with what we found with 5G in a 5G area is that another form of Earth magnetic grid lines, which are normally not activated, and I've actually given these a name called activated grid lines, and these are Earth radiation lines that come out of the ground like this, but they're 2 meters wide. and they are at a grid spacing which is not they run north, south, east, west, and they're roughly 70 metres apart. This grid is activated, and the charge or the intensity of the energy within the grid line is worse than either side of it. And we discovered this grid about 4 years ago occurring around at Christmas time when there were very, very high solar winds, which is another thing that creates that. It was actually running through our house at the time when we were living up the road, so to speak. And the GeoCleanse harmonizer at the time did not neutralise this charge coming out of the ground. So we were well aware of it, and we were quite surprised to see it being activated by the presence of 5G. However, it stands to reason anyway. The next thing we found in the 5G zone is that things like healthy ley lines, and ley lines are earth radiation lines, but they're radiant, they're healthy. Like if you live in a house that has a ley line running through it, and ley lines running grids, then your house will be filled with a radiance, which is a strong negative charge, which is doesn't cause mitochondrial damage, that is in sympathy with the human body. It promotes healthy meridian balance and meridian energy. It promotes healthy emotional states and healthy people. But when the 5G comes along, those healthy ley lines totally get knocked out. They don't exist anymore. Ley lines are at the beck and call of the energetic environment around it. So when we have high solar winds, all the ley lines around the planet are all knocked out. When things settle down, and especially when we have favourable astrological conditions, and you know, some people laugh at astrology, but astrology is all about energy, and I've known that for a long time. When you have favourable astrological events, the ley line energies actually become stronger, but with the 5G, they just get totally wiped out. So if you're living in an area where, or in a house that's got a ley line running through it and everyone's happy and healthy and everything's going fine, along comes 5G, that disappears. And that could have quite a detrimental effect on people's physical and emotional condition. And it'd be a real shock to them too, because if they're in any way sensitive to energy, one day everything will be fine, the next minute, the next day when the 5G is turned on, they'll feel like a bus has hit them. Another thing that 5G does is we have an energy flow around the planet that when everything's favourable and in balance, it runs from north to south during the day and east to west. And east to west is an interesting one because the Indian yogis talk about when they meditate, they like to face east because they believe the spiritual energy flows from east to west. But with the 5G turned on in an area, the spiritual energies, the spiritual energies or the planetary flow stops and it reverses. And when it reverses, people who are sensitive to energy really do feel it. It's a real heaviness in the air. And that's when I get a lot of people ringing me saying, Jared, what the hell is going on? You know, I woke up this morning and couldn't get out of bed and I was cranky as anything, and I got outside, I could feel something was going on and I don't know what it is. That's when the planetary flow of energy is reversed, which can happen when we have high solar winds. And just, I keep on harping on this solar wind thing because it's a good, when it occurs, it's a good equivalent to 5G operating. So when we have a very high solar winds, and I'm talking about wind speeds of 400 to 500 kilometres a second upwards, and we might get that, 2 or 3 days a month, maybe a week in a month. That's when the whole planet is in a virtual 5G environment. And people who know me are known to have heard me say occasionally, oh, look, we've got really high solar winds today. The whole world's living in a virtual 5G environment. So all those fearmongers out there, all the crazies out there who want to scare the hell out of people and cause anxiety cancer, who think they're experts, wouldn't know what's going on when we have high solar winds and the fact that we're in a virtual 5G environment. I've actually had a couple of times where I've rung some people who I know who are real fearmongers and said, guess what? It's 5G all over the world today. They jump out of their pants. It's actually quite funny. So that's 5G in a nutshell. That's what it does. I don't measure 5G with EMF meters because EMF meters can give you dangerously wrong readings. And recently I was watching a YouTube video of a young English couple in George Street in Sydney. A lot of people watching this now may have actually seen that video. And this guy is running around with an EMF meter in George Street saying, look, the meter's going nuts. 5G's turned on here. Well, I can tell you now, 5G wasn't turned on. That meter was giving them the opinion that 5G was turned on. They were actually fearful. Like they were like, oh no, look at the meter, it's saying this. I'm sitting back laughing my head off because I'm reading the energy through the video and 5G was definitely not turned on. There are other things that were creating the high meter readings. So 5G works in zones when they put it in. This is another thing that people often ask me, and it's also too interesting because I think it's Telstra or Optus are now showing maps of 5G areas, and they'll show a map of a suburb and they'll show a round circle depicting the zone where 5G is, where like there's a central point radiating out. I just laughed my head off and thinking, they're misinforming the public because that's just not the way it is. So, okay, what I'll do now is go through some of the questions that we had from the last talk, and we've got some questions coming up in the chat. Okay, someone wanting to know about oxygen, hemoglobin effect. That's a really interesting one. This is getting into the 5G and COVID-19 thing, and I'm not a doctor and I shouldn't really be giving opinions about that. But what I've been saying for 20 years is that any radiation field is going to cause an increase in gravity and a decrease in oxygen, which is going to have an effect on the body. Any balanced field which has a negative charge, a harmonized field, will have a decrease in gravity and increase in oxygen. Let's get that right. So 5G, any radiation field will have an increase in gravity, decrease in oxygen. Any balanced field will have a decrease in gravity and increase in oxygen. And this thing about the hemoglobin, oxygen, the hemoglobin, isn't just unique to 5G, it's any form of radiation field. So they were trying to hang the 5G, blame it on the spread of COVID-19. And in the beginning I was saying, no, it's not just 5G and wouldn't have caused it. But there are so many people totally hoodwinked by a couple of YouTube videos, and one by quite a credible video by a doctor standing in front of a whiteboard. I really liked his video. Even he was trying to point out that fact from a doctor's point of view. But it's any form of radiation field. And I even got bagged by a couple of, grubby little skeptics for making that comment one day, thinking they were expert scientists, but skeptics are just pseudoscientists. We know that all the time. Okay, so let's go through some of the questions. And another one question that came up, which came from people watching YouTube videos, was the beamforming or the phased array aspect of the 5G phones when you're in a 5G area, whereas the antenna is able to send a beam to the nearest 5G streetlight and in reverse back to the phone. And the claim is it's a new thing with 5G. No, that's been around forever and a day, since 3G. I remember before 4G came in, doing experiments with mobile phones in developing our mobile phone radiation harmonizer, which, by the way, a lot of health practitioners around the world believe is the best in the world. And they say to me, where in Germany is it made? No, I developed it. We make it here in Victoria. And while I was doing my testing and research years ago, I discovered this beamforming aspect of mobile phones. The same thing actually goes on with Wi-Fi too. You could have a Wi-Fi router on over there and a laptop over there. And when someone's on the laptop communicating with the Wi-Fi router, you get a beam going from one to the other. And if you put yourself within that beam, you'll be under radiation stress. If you get close to the laptop when you're using the laptop's going to have a greater radiation field around it because it's got the Wi-Fi operating, and don't get within 1.5 meters of the router when it's operating because its radiation field is very, very strong. Other things that create beamforming is a baby monitor. You have a baby monitor here, you have the baby monitor there, and there's a beam going between the two of them. You just want to make sure that the beam isn't going through baby. Not a good thing at all. So phased array or beamforming has been around for a long time. A lot of people ask, why is 5G dangerous compared to 4G? Well, 5G covers a whole area with charge, whereas 4G, a 4G tower, its radiation field, harmful radiation field, may only extend out to 50, 60 meters around it. Beyond that, you'll have a wave, and the wave is actually harmless, although I know some building biologists will go, no, the wave is not harmless because our radio frequency meters show it to be very high. But all the testing we tend to do is testing a person against a radiation field. And when you put a person in an area where there's Wi-Fi operating and they're away from the beam and they're away from the technology, like the router and the device it's communicating with, you put them outside of that, you might have a high radio frequency reading, but when you test that field against the person, there's actually no radiation stress going on. 4G towers within 50 to 60 meters create that radiation charge coming out of the ground. And if you put a building within that field, then you're going to have a building that's fully engulfed with charge. It's the same thing that occurs with high voltage power lines, which I know it's not part of this talk with 5G, but it's relevant because there are government standards that say you can't build within 80 meters either side of high voltage power lines. However, I've seen brand new estates on the Gold Coast where the houses are right underneath the high voltage power lines. And there are some suburbs in Melbourne, older suburbs, which have houses and the schools underneath the high voltage power lines. That field either side, 80 meters either side, is where, like the mobile phone tower, you have a charge coming out of the ground. You build a building within that field and you're going to have a building filled with charge. Although I did do a Google Earth reading for a client a couple of weeks ago where they were living about 120 meters from some very large high voltage power lines, and I was able to measure the charge coming out of the ground, not to just 80 meters, it was coming out of the ground to about 160 meters. So the government standards sort of, half correct and sort of there, but it's not taking into account different what you put outputs of voltage. I'm not an electrician, caused by different types of high voltage power lines. Okay, more questions. I've actually got some questions coming up on the side here. Let's see what people are asking. I've got someone explaining what the GeoCleanse is. I won't go into that today. That's all over the website. Today is about information, not selling product. I'll mention, but that's okay. I guess an interesting question. A guy named Nick. How are you, Nick? He's got a Stellar Dome, which is one of our new products. I'll answer this question. That's a Stellar Dome there. Gorgeous product, actually. He's a truck driver and he's wondering whether if the Stellar Dome in his truck is going to move along with him, as in the charge, the neutralised field as he's driving along. Well, yeah, Nick, it will. Don't worry about that. Here's another question from a Julie. Does the amount of metal in a human body from pollutants and pesticides and dental work heavily have any effect, on the body from 5G? That's an interesting one. Some people say they do, but I had a fall last year down 7 stairs here, and these walls behind us are concrete. And I broke my left arm down here, and I've got 11 pins in there and a plate that goes from there to there. And I've been in 5G zones and all sorts of toxic houses doing consultancy, and I haven't noticed anything going on with that. And here she's mentioning dental fillings too, and I've got a few amalgams. I shouldn't have them, so Leanne says. For me, I haven't found any, it hasn't affected me. And I'd take me as being the guinea pig there, maybe. Okay. Another question from 2 weeks ago, what effect mentally and physically will 5G have on our health? And that's a really good one. I talk about this all the time. Radiation has an effect on our meridian system. Our meridians feed energy to our organs. And if someone is unwell, let's say someone had a virus and it was in the liver energy would be down, would be low, and the liver meridian would actually be turned off or be very low in energy. And reading meridian energy isn't science fiction. It's something that's very easy to do. I use this in my consultancy work. I don't know if you can see this. This is my biotensor. It's the best EMF meter in the world. It doesn't lie like a radio frequency meter or a Gauss meter. This was developed by a German building biologist and scientist called Joseph Oberbach, who died last century. In Australia, that's trademarked as a medical instrument, and its trademark description is as an instrument for detecting harmful radiation. Well, you can use the biotensor to pick up radiation fields, but you can also use it to measure meridian energy in the body, how well the meridians are faring. So radiation has a positive charge. Our meridian energy has a negative charge. It's a nice, light, healthy energy. Our organs operate within those negative charge frequencies, or they operate at different frequencies. That's when we're physically healthy. But if the meridian energy is interfered with by the negative charge has been interfered with by the positive charge from a radiation field, the meridian energy will drop, and the associated organ, its energy will drop too, caused by the meridian energy not supplying enough energy. The meridian is supplying enough energy, sorry. So if your endocrine organs or glands are affected by radiation, that's going to interfere with your hormones, so to speak, and your neurotransmitters. And if your neurotransmitters and hormones are upset, then your anandamine, your cannabinoid receptors, there's 4 or 5 of them there. I know them from my bioresonance, not just off the top of my head, can't spill them out straight away. Those happy hormones and neurotransmitters are going to turn unhappy, and it's going to make people feel depressed or angry or lethargic or just not really with it. It's going to have a big effect on us emotionally. Physically, by having the meridian energy interfere with to an organ, it's going to lower the organ energy, and the organ then may not start to actually function correctly. And there comes your physical effects. It also will have an effect on the pineal gland, and especially the pituitary gland. People, and I know myself, people who meditate, who know how to focus on the third eye, when there's a lot of radiation in the air, so to speak, or in radiation fields, it becomes very, very hard to actually focus and get that energy running in the third eye. And that's the pituitary being actually interfered with by radiation. May have an effect on your heart, so your heart meridian, your central meridian, your pericardium meridian, your circulation meridians, they can all, all their energies can be interfered with. But basically, because as individuals, as human beings, we're all individually different, it'll affect one person differently to another. Although amongst a group of, say, 50 people, you might find 30 people are affected in a very, very similar way, and 20 people are just totally all over the place, depending on where their weakness is. What I mean there is that we all have a genetic, I call it junk DNA weakness, and I'm not getting into DNA or anything like that. So, for example, mine's thyroid gland sitting over here, large intestine. Their weakness might be heart, someone might be liver, might be adrenals. It's all got to do with our major organs. And I know how to read this because with our coloured orgone pendants, if your weakness is thyroid, then you wear a blue pendant, because the colour blue, what it does is it is the same frequency of what's required for the triple warmer meridian, which is that one there running up here, which governs the thyroid and hormones. If that's interfered with, then you'll have a hole in your biofield, and that hole in the biofield then weakens our energetic field, and then we then become susceptible to radiation. However, if you wear the right coloured pendant to bring your weakness up, the hole in the biofield closes up, your biofield becomes bigger and stronger. When I say stronger, it has a greater negative charge, which is what our biofield should be. So positive charge fields are met by the negative charge of the biofield, and the negative charge neutralises the positive charge. Now, we've known that for a long, long time. Okay, more questions. A lot of these questions that came in last week are all about coronavirus. It's a lot of people actually really spooked by the so-called connection between coronavirus and 5G. As I said, I don't. It's all forms of radiation. I don't buy into the fact that 5G caused the coronavirus. There's other things going on there. A good question. How will we know when 5G is being switched on? If you're sensitive to energy, you'll feel it. If you watch the technology, as I was talking about before, on the street lights, then you'll know what's going on. Since I started talking or educating people about the streetlights, there's an amazing amount of people come back to me going, I've been driving down this road or in that area, and I saw this and I saw that, and I've taken a photo, and what do you think, type of thing, is it operating? So I've got everyone looking in the sky at streetlights. Another interesting thing about the streetlights is all of our sodium globe highway lights in Melbourne were all replaced about 4 or 5 years ago. And when they replaced them, I remember looking up at one going, what's that red disc or bulb hanging underneath the sodium globes? 5G antenna. Because as we know, one of the reasons for 5G isn't just for mobile data and 5G broadband. In the future, we'll be driving cars which will be drivers, so we won't be driving, the cars will be driving us to the pub, operating under the 5G system. They'll get their information on when to stop quickly, when to turn, when to change lane or whatever at high speed, because all the street lights will have the 5G antennas. A good question is just coming in here now from Sandy, asking, is it true 5G was developed as a bioweapon for mind control and crowd control, for example, riots? No, I don't think so. When we were in Dixon in Canberra, it was a very laid-back shopping area. There was a Woolworths, there was a couple of cafes, a library, and a 3-level office building. And people were walking around as if nothing was happening. It was like they had no idea what was going on. We were feeling it, but the people were totally oblivious to what was going on. So as a means for crowd control, maybe not, unless they can turn it up, then that would be a problem. If you want to call anything a bioweapon for mind control, it's our digital TV. Many years ago, and I still say I'm the first in the world to actually recognise that digital TV is our most dangerous appliance in the house. Some people might say the Wi-Fi router. No, not really, but you don't want to get within 1.5 meters of a Wi-Fi router, then you're under a lot of radiation stress. What I found from digital TV is that, that's even better. That's our TV. In front of the screen, like that, the shape of the screen is the radiation beam. And that can go for 150 metres, which means that if you're living in a suburb where everything's nice and flat and you're quite built up, you're getting digital TV beams which have charge going through your house from the neighbours. And so when you sit in front of a digital TV, the amount of radiation stress you're under is quite high. When you turn the TV off, that beam is still there. It's very subtle compared to when it's turned on, excuse me, but it's still there. I contacted the Digital Rollout Corporation back then. I sent them a little email saying, I'm a building biologist and I found this going on with digital TV. What do you think? What can you tell me? And they emailed me back saying, if it can't be measured with a radio frequency meter or a Gauss meter, it doesn't exist. Well, you can't. It's outside their spectrums or scopes. Then the next paragraph went on to say, if you dare talk about it in public, we'll sue you for slander. I thought, beauty. I was doing a talk the week later at Mind, Body, Spirit in Melbourne. I thought I needed extra content. What could be better? Fantastic. So in every talk, I've actually spoken about that. And I even wrote a blog about it, Digital TV last year. I wanted to put in the blog the bit about the Digital Rollout Corporation, and our web developer at the time said, no, don't do that, too dangerous, you know. But hang on, the Digital Rollout Corporation was disbanded after they switched over from analog to TV, the digital anyway. So that's, to me, is our real bioweapon. Another question here, can 5G at 60 megahertz cause things like nosebleeds, headaches, respiratory problems, birds and bees dying? Nosebleeds, headaches, respiratory problems depends on the person, what's going on with them. When we were in Canberra, one thing we did look for was dead birds and no bees and things like that, but it was March and the sun was out and the flowers were out and the bees were everywhere. We looked at that. There were birds flying around. So that really dispels that myth. Like the amount of fearmongers out there saying, oh, 5G was turned on my area, all the birds fell out of the sky. No, I don't think so. They're probably more resistant to radiation than humans are because their biofields are much stronger. They don't know any better. There's a lot of reasons, esoterical reasons why their energy fields are much stronger than ours. They don't pay tax. They're not browbeaten by governments into staying at home all the time. They don't have negative emotions like we do, although they do have a choice in some things anyway. Another thing. Next question here from Maria, what is the long-term solution to neutralise energy and effective radiation? Well, that's our geocleanser, our Stelladome. That's why we did the testing last year, to make damn sure that if we were going to say anything, we had done the testing and we provided video to show that. It's interesting, I see a lot of other EMF products in the market, like Scalar products and things like that, all claiming that the 5G, claiming that they neutralise 5G. Sorry, Siri. And I've tested them all and none of them do. And I'm not lying either, and I could demonstrate that with video, but I don't like to have a go at other people's products by making videos to defame them. Let the people work it out via their actual experiences. Okay, I've got more questions here. They're coming in left, right and centre. Someone asking about a Faraday cage to protect from 5G, and that comes under the same sort of lines as shielding. And I've been saying forever and a day, we've done lots of testing and shielding, and 5G will go straight through shielding. Shielding protects from radio frequency wave, which is harmless, which is, what are they doing it for? And it's very, very expensive. I've seen shielding mosquito nets over beds costing $2,000. And if you had 5G, it's not going to protect you from the 5G. And if you didn't have 5G, you get Earth radiation coming upwards out of the ground, and the net's not going to protect you from that. And the Fisher grid, which is a grid of 70 metres square, which is of fissures which are like fault lines in the ground creating under compression, which create kinetic energy, which is a charge above them. Those fissures do cause cancer. I deal with building biologists in Germany and Europe, and forever and a day they've been saying they call them water veins cause cancer. And I did a study on about 50 or so cancer patients last year as to where their houses were, and every single one of them had a fissure running through the house. So, shielding might sound fancy and they claim they're scientific, but no, when you test the shielding against radiation against the real person, the person's still under radiation stress. Okay. So more questions coming in. I was only going to go for 3/4 of an hour, but if you want me to keep on going and answering more questions, I'm happy to do that. We'll make beer o'clock 5:30. Leanne's enjoying a champagne. Oh, she needs a refill, does she? Go through some more questions. Yeah, here's a question from Amy Smith. She's saying, if I understand you correctly, you are saying that the effects of high solar winds cannot be neutralised. No, Amy, what I'm saying, yes, we can neutralise the effect of high solar winds. That's the magnetoterralic energy that comes up out of the ground. And that's something we discovered 4 years ago and made changes in the programming to the geoclinks to be able to do that. I've got a lot of questions here about product, and I really didn't want to talk about product that's on the website. I really want to answer the questions about 5G. Where are we? Here's a question. We live in an area with underground power, so will 5G go on all of our streetlights? Yes, it will, absolutely. Yeah, another question here from last week or 2 weeks ago, pardon me, is will churches be affected by 5G? And this is a really big one. You know, a lot of people still keep their faith, even though, you know, the media likes to chuck rocks at the Catholic Church at the moment, it always has. A church's energy, no matter whether it's a Catholic church, a mosque, synagogue, a temple, you name it, they all have a nice, radiant, healthy negative charge, a healthy energy. That comes from the sincerity from the people of their faith and what goes on in the church. And you know, whenever I'm driving around, if I see a church, I always read the energy of the church, and it comes up at 100%. When we were in Canberra, we did pass a very old Catholic church. It was probably, when I say very old, it was probably built in the 50s. It was a real crappy looking poo brown brick. It was really weird. It was a traditional cathedral style church with a very high ceiling and the steeple. And it was really saddening to see that the complete whole energy of the church had been overtaken by the 5G charge. And that's going to have a really big effect on people who do go to church, because a lot of people who do go are tuning into that spiritual energy, like negative charge, healthy radiance is actually a spiritual energy. They dovetail into each other. They are one and the same. So those people who are sensitive to energy and enjoy their Sunday outing for an hour at the local church and really tuned into the spiritual energy, it's not going to be there. It's going to be gone. I see that as a real tragedy. More questions. Okay, someone wants to see a photo from earlier on. I'm really new at this screen sharing thing, so she wanted to see the antenna photo again, so I'll show it to you all again for Melinda. There's another photo of the repeater again. It looks a bit different to the other one. This was taken in Canberra. So for Melinda, that's one part of the technology you're looking for with 5G, in the 5G area. Here's a really, really good question. Okay, this is Robin. She lives in New Zealand, and she's asking, how is 5G going to be delivered to the population over there? Well, it'll be the same as here. But you know, I do readings for people in different countries all over the world, day in, day out. And there's something about New Zealand that New Zealand people get a little bit funny when they hear this, so you feel a bit offended. I'm not offending anyone. Is that when New Zealand's energy there is so toxic, it's worse than 5G. And that is because there's a bioplasmic energy, which is human generated from negative emotional pain body energy caused by all the Maori wars that went on there in history. And when you get lots of killing going on and anger going on, that emotional pain body charge from those doing the killing and doing the dying is so great, it becomes a radiation field that covers all of New Zealand, and it creates a charge coming out of the ground just like 5G does. So when they turn 5G on in New Zealand, they'll be going, oh, I can get 5G on my phone. They won't be going, oh, what's this horrible energy? In Australia, because we don't have that problem, although we did have areas of Australia that had it localised because of what English did to Aboriginals, which was underrated as to how many people really were killed. You know, history books really like to lie. It's a bit more willing if you've all read 1984, how they changed history. It's a little bit like Facebook. It does happen, and it did happen in Australia, but not everywhere. But in New Zealand, it's everywhere. And that same thing goes for China too. Like they say they turned 5G on in Wuhan, they all got sick. Well, hang on. Wuhan's energy was so toxic, it was as bad as New Zealand. So when they turned the 5G on in Wuhan, they weren't going, oh, what's this we're feeling? They're going, oh, I can get 5G on our phone now. If you've already got a very heavy bioplasmic charge over a whole country or a whole city or a whole zone, a whole area, which is as bad as, if not than 5G, when they turn the 5G on, all you'll get is something on your phone saying you've got 5G. You won't be feeling the effects because what's already been going on has been worse than 5G. The New Zealanders, like all humans, adapt to the energy of what's going on there. But you know, when the New Zealander buys a GeoCleanse or a Stelladome and they plug it into their house and activate it, it actually removes the bioplasmic imprint from what's gone in the past to the boundaries of their property. And if they turn the GeoCleanse off or pull it out, it doesn't come back. So it's able to create holes in that dirty energy in places like New Zealand. And it's amazing how they report back to me like, wow, I've never felt anything like this in their entire life. No, they wouldn't, because they've never been able to escape it. It's always been there.